Okay, let's dive right into this explainer of a true, terrifying school trip that turned into an absolute nightmare. I mean, we all remember those school trips, right? The excitement, the sudden freedom, the feeling of finally being away from home and your parents. But today, we're going to look at a deeply unsettling chain of events where a totally simple detour on the way to Shimla led to a tragedy that completely defies logical explanation. It's really fascinating how a totally relatable, innocent teenage impulse to look cool set the stage for unimaginable horror here. Think about it. When you're a teenager, breaking a minor rule kind of feels like a rite of passage. It's almost expected. But as we'll see from the accounts of this particular night, crossing the boundary from the safety of a supervised trip into the unknown, well, it can sometimes awaken things that really should be left alone.
All right, let's get into section 1, A Night in the Woods.
Our chilling story begins with just some classic bad luck. After their school bus breaks down late at night, the teachers have to scramble to find an emergency shelter for the students at this incredibly isolated hotel. And I'm not talking about a standard roadside motel here. This place was flanked on both sides by massive, towering trees and imposing mountains. So the teachers quickly divide the students into different rooms for the night. And here's where we find our three main subjects, three good friends named Amin, Rohan, and Ayu. They are absolutely thrilled to be sharing a room, completely unaware of what is lurking right outside their window in the thick, silent forest.
Moving on to section 2, The Midnight Lake Dare.
So, looking out their window, the boys spot a mysterious lake nestled deep in the woods, and they hatch a plan that will ultimately seal their fate. They remembered this old story from a previous school trip where two kids snuck out to a lake at night and basically became legends at their school. They wanted that exact same fame, so they laid out this super simple three-step plan. Just a quick photo op, really. As soon as the hotel guard dozed off, the three boys quietly slipped out into the pitch-black night. But as the freezing cold set in and their glowing screens went dark, they realized they needed to turn back immediately. What looked like a super quick walk from their hotel window actually turned into a grueling trek. They walked for nearly an hour. The temperature completely plummeted, and they were shivering in this desolate forest. And then, when they checked their phones, they had absolutely zero signal. No bars. Nothing. That's the exact moment pure panic started to set in, and they wisely decided to scrap the whole plan and just use their flashlights to find their way back.
Which brings us to section 3, Possession in the Forest.
But turning back wasn't going to be that simple, because the forest had already claimed one of them. Aman and Ayu were walking slightly ahead, desperately trying to navigate back to safety. They turn around, and Rohan is just gone. Out of nowhere, they hear the sound of someone running nearby. Terrified but obviously unwilling to abandon their friend, they follow the echoing footsteps deeper into the pitch-black woods. Then the running suddenly stops, and a new sound replaces it. A bizarre, rhythmic sound. It's the unmistakable sound of someone digging into the earth. Aman and Ayu cautiously peek from behind some bushes and discover Rohan, on his hands and knees, frantically digging a hole in the dirt. Trembling with fear, they call out his name. Rohan stops digging. He slowly turns around to face them, and the visual they are met with is absolutely paralyzing. His eyes are no longer human. Actually, scratch that, they aren't even really eyes anymore. They are entirely black, looking as though his actual eyes had been completely hollowed out from the inside, literally plucked out. Whatever was inside Rohan in that moment possessed an unnatural, terrifying physical power. Despite the horrific sight, Amin bravely approaches his friend and gently places a hand on his shoulder, asking what's wrong. The reaction is instantaneous and violent. Rohan unleashes this furious, blood-curdling scream and shoves Amin backward with a force that sends him literally flying through the air. Immediately after that, Rohan's body just gives out. He drops to the ground, racked by bizarre, violent seizures, before finally passing out entirely. Ayu rushes over, desperately trying to wake Rohan up. But when Rohan finally regains consciousness, the nightmare doesn't end. It just shifts. Rohan looks over at Amin. Amin is sitting there on the ground, his head slumped forward. And then he slowly lifts his head. His eyes are now entirely pitch black. Before Ayu can even process what on earth is happening, this dark entity seemingly transfers to Amin, forcing Ayu and Rohan to chase him as he suddenly springs up and sprints off into the unknown depths of the forest.
Now we enter section 4, The Old Ruin's Secret.
Tracking Armin with their flashlights, the boys are led even deeper into the woods, eventually arriving at a decaying ancient ruin where clearly no human has stepped in years. The structure kind of looks like an old abandoned house. They are absolutely terrified, practically paralyzed by dread, but they know they can't leave Armin behind. Gathering their courage, Ayu and Rohan step inside the decaying ruins, only to witness an impossible, chilling sight that breaks literally every law of reality. Right there, in the center of the room, is Armin. He is completely unconscious, but he is suspended, literally hovering in midair. Standing right next to the floating Armin is an old woman, and she is just murmuring to him. Her appearance is straight out of a nightmare. Just like the boy's eyes earlier, hers are completely black voids. Her skin is decaying, hanging loosely off her face, framed by wild, unkempt white hair. The moment they see her, pure survival instinct kicks in. They turn and run for the exit. But she doesn't just let them go. The moment the boys turn to run, this monstrous woman pursues them in the most unnatural, horrifying way imaginable. As Ayu and Rohan rush toward the door, they glance back over their shoulders. The old woman isn't running after them. She is crawling down the stairs behind them, her body moving with the eerie, disjointed speed of an insect.
Section 5. Tragedy at the Lake.
Panic completely takes over as they sprint blindly through the dense trees, desperate to escape the crawling horror closing in behind them. In their blind panic, totally disoriented by the dark and the sheer terror of it all, they don't even realize where they're running. Suddenly, the ground just vanishes beneath their feet and they crash violently into the freezing water of the lake they had spent the entire night trying to find. The struggle in the water is brief, but it is brutal. Almost immediately, both boys feel an immense, unseen, heavy force pulling them down into the murky depths. It literally feels as if something is physically dragging them beneath the surface. Ayu fights with every ounce of strength he has left and somehow manages to break the surface, gasping for air. But as he reaches the shore, he is forced to watch helplessly as Rohan is pulled completely under. Overwhelmed by the cold, the shock, and the unbelievable trauma of watching his friend drown, Ayu's vision blurs and he loses consciousness on the muddy bank. When Ayu finally opens his eyes, he isn't by the lake anymore. He wakes up back in his bed at the hotel. Totally disoriented and panicked, he stumbles outside, and the scene that greets him is just heartbreaking. Flashing police lights are cutting through the morning fog. A massive police presence has surrounded the hotel, and lying there on the ground are two bodies, completely wrapped in white sheets. Asmin and Rohan did not survive the night.
And finally, Section 6, The Vengeful Spirit's Truth.
The immediate tragedy was over, but the explanation behind what actually killed these boys remains violently contested to this day. The police quickly wrapped up their investigation, officially declaring the incident a tragic double murder that occurred in the woods. Case closed, right? Well, when you ask the locals who actually live near those woods, they tell a vastly different, deeply unsettling story about those ruins and that lake. You see, they believe this wasn't just some random attack. It was the manifestation of decades-old wrath from a woman who was brutally wronged by her own village. According to local history, years ago, an old woman lived peacefully in that very house in the woods. But a group of villagers, greedy for her land, violently assaulted her. They murdered her and unceremoniously dumped her body into that exact same lake. Ever since that horrific crime, the locals know better than to ever go near the lake or the forest at night. They believe her vengeful spirit relentlessly haunts the area, seeking retribution on anyone foolish enough to wander into her domain. It's a really tragic reminder of how ignoring local folklore and stepping into places of past trauma can have fatal consequences. If those three boys had just known the bloody history of the land they were walking on, they never would have snuck out. They never would have sought out the lake for a silly photo, and Aman and Rohan might still be alive today. As we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with this final, chilling thought to keep you awake tonight. When the police close a case with pure logic, but the land itself clearly carries the scars of a brutal murder, who do you believe? And if you ever find yourself looking out a hotel window at a dark, isolated forest, you really have to ask yourself, who is really waiting in the dark by the lake?